Everyone, welcome to our lecture series on Japanese history. And today we're going to talk about a period in early Japanese history, the late Asuka to through the Nara period. And we're going to focus on the process of imperial succession and establishing a centralized state and government bureaucracy. And I want to show that this process was a highly contested process and that various factions competed for power and sought to solidify their power using various means, including myth, religion, geography, and law. Okay, so let's get started. The politics of imperial rule in early Japan. So there's a common narrative floated around in some circles and throughout periods in Japanese history of Japanese history being an unbroken line of emperors starting from the mythical Emperor Jimmu in 660 BCE. And this has its basis in various mytho-histories like the Kojiki, written in 712, and the Nihon Shoki, written in 720, and I'll talk about the background to these works a bit later. And the other idea is that this was a harmonious process which epitomizes the spirit of Wa that comes up in Prince Shotoku's 604 CE constitution. But I want to show that the reality was actually much different, that the emergence of imperial rule was a messy process of wars, violence, and fighting, that emperors and leaders were motivated by political concerns and maintaining their tenuous grips on power. In fact, the first verifiable emperor is not until the Emperor Kinmei in 539 CE, nearly a millennia after the mythical Emperor Jimmu. And that this idea of an unbroken line narrative that kind of emerges from the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki was constructed post hoc to justify imperial rule and used much later to inspire Japanese nationalism. But the story goes that Izanami and Izanagi, these two creator gods, set the whole process in motion. Their offspring, Amaterasu, the sun goddess, then is seen as the progenitor of the entire line of Japanese emperors. But all of her offspring are, even up until here, are mythical figures. And then apparently all of the offspring of Emperor Jimmu form all of the successive Yamato emperors. But all of these up until here are purely mythical figures. And rather than this process of descending from the clouds and being a smooth, harmonious process, was actually emperors and leaders were competing and vying for power, and they used various means to solidify their power. So this can be referred to simply as imperial politics. So to take an example, we can look at Prince Shotoku's famous 17-article constitution of 604 CE. And Buddhism at the time was admired among some Yamato rulers like Prince Shotoku for its connections to an advanced system of governance of Chinese culture and politics. And Japanese leaders, some, wanted to implement and to make use of this in their society and use it to solidify and strengthen their rule. So rather than widely promoting Buddhism, Prince Shotoku is sometimes seen as a Buddhist patron or saint, but rather he was mainly interested in using Buddhism for himself to gain leverage over other clan chiefs. And his attempts to make the emperor head of Buddhism went hand in hand with efforts to promote his son to the throne. And these attempts were opposed by other Soga leaders at the time. But later, Prince Shotoku, after Buddhism does become popular in Japanese society and is adopted amongst the emperors and aristocracy, in the Nara and Heian period, Shotoku is then reinvented as a Buddhist saint, and he emerges much later, during World War II, with an emphasis on his idea of wa, that is used to promote loyalty to the nation and emperor. But again, this is not his original intent. This is just happening, many centuries later, millennia later, used for contemporary political purposes. Next, I want to talk about Emperor Tenji, sometimes called Tenchi, and the Jinshin disturbance in 672 CE. And this shows a lot of the intense fighting and serious geopolitical concerns that Japanese leaders were focused on at the time. So Tang China and Silla in Korea had conquered Japan's Korean ally Pakche in 663. And Tenchi actually had sent a fleet of Japanese ships to go support Pakche in their fight against Tang China and Silla, but the fleet was destroyed. So next, Tenji fears that Tang China and Silla armies are going to perhaps come to Japan and try to invade. So in addition to building up military defenses, he moves the capital from Asuka to Omi in 667, 668. And this is near Lake Biwa in the area of Otsu. Then, shortly before his death, Tenji offered the throne to his brother Owama. However, Owama declined and instead decided to become a monk. And he left the court to do so. And in place of that, then Tenji's son, Otomo, succeeded Emperor Tenji. However, Otomo felt that as long as Owama was alive, even if he was living an aesthetic life, he might still be a threat to his rule. So Otomo took an army to attack Owama. However, he was in fact defeated by Owama and his allies, and this was known as the Jinshin disturbance in 672. So, as punishment for that, Otomo committed suicide and his followers were all banished. And then this did provide motivation for Owama to take the title of emperor, to take the throne, and he did so in a very big way, and he consolidated his power in a way that previous emperors had not. For instance, he made Tenji's daughter, his own niece, his main consort, and she later became Empress Jito. He also adopted Otomo's other relatives and sons and made them his adopted sons, so that he felt he could keep a close eye on them and they wouldn't pose so much of a threat to his rule. And then he renamed himself Emperor Tenmu, and he notably is the first then to call himself Tenno, to use the term Tenno, which then we translate into English as emperor. So Tenmu and Jito then turned back to history to try to use history as a tool to legitimatize their rule, and they did so by commissioning the writings of the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. And these are centered around, especially the Kojiki, but Nihon Shoki is just an account of the imperial lineage. Kojiki relies much more on mythology, showing or purporting to show that the emperors all the way up conveniently until Tenmu were descended from the gods, were all the offspring of Amaterasu. And we can see then there's a lot of politics going on in these works as well, because Tenji's ally, Tenji and his allies, and the Omi court are all portrayed very badly, whereas Tenmu and his allies in the Jinshin disturbance are all portrayed quite well. Later, Empress Gemme commissioned Ono Yasumaru to finish writing the Kojiki, which had remained incomplete. And then this is completed around 712. But later accounts like the Kaifuso in 751 actually gave alternative narratives to both of these writings and portrayed Tenji in a more positive light. We can even see these politics at play in famous literary works of the time, such as the Manyoshu. Empress Jito commissioned Kakinomoto no Hitomaru to write many of the poems in the Manyoshu. But we see here, instead of this kind of linear narrative and more positive narrative that is going on in Kojiki and Nihon Shoki, we see much more complex memories of Tenji and the Omi court. This is not surprising, considering that that Emperor Tenji was Jito's father, who then she later became the consort of Tenmu. So she would, I think quite obviously have very complex feelings about the Omi court. And this is kind of expressed in the Manyoshu. And so she sends Kakinomoto no Hitomaru to Omi, which is now just lying in ruins and has been that way for decades, to write poems that basically serve as eulogies to pacify the dead there. And so one famous example is this poem on passing the ruined capital of Omi. And part of it reads, "The heavenly Lord, divine sovereign, though we have heard here was his glorious palace, though it is said here were his glorious halls, now all is overgrown by the spring grass, and clouded by the haze of the spring sun. As we look at the sight of the glorious palace, we are filled with sadness." So this displays some of these complex emotions that are likely going on within Jito herself and her court at the time, referring to Tenji as heavenly lord, divine sovereign, the Omi court is glorious palace, and kind of nostalgically reminiscing about it, and then looking back at it now, just lying in ruins and being filled with sadness. So it's much different than the triumphant narrative that we see in Kojiki, for instance. Here, by the way, is a brief lineage of emperors at the time. And here we have Tenji, Tenmu, and Jito and their offspring. And next I'm going to talk more about Emperor Shomu. And he's notable for various reasons for promoting Buddhism, but also because his mother was from the Fujiwara family. And so within this lineage, then, of succession, there starts to be kind of a competition between pro and anti-Fujiwara factions, who then are contesting the power of Shomu and his offspring, especially Empress Koken. So we'll talk about this next. But emperors then, to strengthen their control, they used other methods, religious rituals, for instance, creating a hierarchy of gods, of kami, with Amaterasu at the top. And since the emperors were her offspring, then this would place them actually as also at the top of this hierarchy. They've already been made, kind of head of Buddhist rituals, head of Buddhism in Japan. Capitals, though, too, were used to solidify imperial rule and capitals were moved frequently at this time when new emperors wanted to kind of get away from the past and to start their kind of get a fresh image, basically. But it's important to remember, and I'll show a picture in a minute, that the imperial palace was located right at the center of these capitals, which were arranged on grids in the Chinese style. And this is true for Fujiwara, the capital at Fujiwara when Empress Jito built that, as well as the capital in Nara, at that time Heijo, which was constructed under orders of Empress Genmei. And then emperors used law as well to reinforce their power. The Taiho Code of 701 and the Yodo Code of 718 established what is known as the Ritsuryo system of law, a legal and administrative system that did many different things. It provided a law of the land. It touched on all different aspects of society. But just a couple notable points. It took power away from clan chieftains and in place of that created a centralized bureaucracy under the emperor. And then it assigned ranks to all of the aristocratic officials. So here's an image of what the Fujiwara capital looked like with the palace right at the center. Both of these are from the Cambridge History of Japan, Volume 1. So you can see how symbolically the emperor is placed, and geographically, spatially, the emperor is placed at the center of life here. And then here is the administrative bureaucracy put in place under the Ritsuryo system with the emperor at the top. He's head of Council of Divinity Affairs or Kami Affairs, head of the Council of State, and then which under the Council of State then is Minister of Left, Minister of the Right, and then various ministries, some of which might sound even quite familiar for contemporary audiences: civil affairs, war, justice, treasury, etc. Emperor Shomu then, I want to focus on him, and then his daughter, Empress Koken. So Shomu used Buddhism especially to solidify his rule. His rule was contested, as I mentioned, partly from the anti-Fujiwara factions because he had a Fujiwara mother. He attempted to establish a statewide Buddhist system with Todaiji at the top of this, and it was notably then quite large, the largest Buddha statue, with the emperor then as the head of Buddhism at the top of this kind of statewide Buddhist system. But also Buddhism had a role in protecting the nation, for saying prayers and sutras that would strengthen the nation. And this was especially true after the 735 smallpox epidemic, which was disastrous for society at that time. It's estimated that 1/3 of the entire population died, including many aristocrats close to Shomu. So this idea that Buddhism had some role to play in protecting the nation, protecting people's lives, was very powerful at the time. So Shomu was eventually succeeded by his daughter Koken, but her rule was also contested, and Koken then developed an intimate relationship with a nominally Buddhist priest, Dokyo, but he was mostly known for having reportedly occult powers. And when Koken had fallen ill, he apparently used these magic powers to heal her. So she had a very close relationship with him and promoted him to the highest levels of state. And this was unprecedented, unthinkable for who was basically, in someone that was just in civilian office, who wasn't of aristocratic birth. She exiled Emperor Junin, placed restrictions on landholders, but gave special rights to Buddhist temples. And this was all, partly to patronize Buddhism, but also done out of political concern to give more power to Dokyo, who she was trying to promote to high levels of state. But after Koken's death, Dokyo was then exiled, and the new leaders were determined not to let descendants of Tenmu to the throne. They really didn't like where the direction that Koken had gone in, and there were a lot of Shomu as well, had a lot of enemies in the court. So partly to break away from this legacy then, Emperor Kanmu, who was a Tenji descendant, moved the capital to Nagaoka in 784, and then after this, shortly thereafter, the capital was again moved to Heian-kyo, which is known as Kyoto. But we'll talk more about that in a future lecture. So in conclusion, I've just talked about how this process of solidifying imperial rule from Asuka through Nara was very messy and contested. Various factions competed for control of the throne, and emperors utilized myth, religion, geography, and law to strengthen their power. Okay, and I'm going to conclude there. So I hope this lecture has been informative, and I look forward to our next lecture talking about Japanese history in the Heian period.